Scientists monitoring the ruins of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine have seen a surge in fission reactions in an inaccessible chamber within the complex. They're now investigating whether the problem will stabilize or require a dangerous and difficult intervention to prevent a runaway nuclear reaction. Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel. In today's video, we'll be talking about why Chernobyl is a big problem in 2021. If you're new here, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notifications bell to get updates whenever we post. Ukraine marks the 35th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster, the biggest one in the history of nuclear energy. The consequences of it are still impossible to evaluate, but we do know that a huge radioactive cloud gradually reached almost every corner on Earth. The explosion at Chernobyl in 1986 brought down walls and sealed off many rooms and corridors. Tons of fissile material from the interior of a reactor were strewn throughout the facility, and the heat it generated melted sand from the reactor walls with concrete and steel to form lava-like and intensely radioactive substances that oozed into the lower floors. So what caused the Chernobyl accident on April 26, 1986? On April 26, 1986, the number 4 RBMK reactor at the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, Ukraine went out of control during a test at low power, leading to an explosion and fire that demolished the reactor building and released large amounts of radiation into the atmosphere. Safety measures were ignored. The uranium fuel in the reactor overheated and melted through the protective barriers. RBMK reactors don't have what is known as a containment structure, a concrete and steel dome over the reactor itself designed to keep radiation inside the plant in the event of such an accident. Consequently, radioactive elements including plutonium, iodine, strontium, and caesium were scattered over a wide area. In addition, the graphite blocks used as a moderating material in the RBMK caught fire at high temperature as air entered the reactor core, which contributed to emission of radioactive materials into the environment. Survivors of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster have long lived with a lingering fear. Did radiation exposure mutate their sperm and eggs, possibly dooming their children to genetic diseases? Many people think if you have been irradiated, you must have effects in the next generation, says immunologist Dmitry Byzika, Director General of the National Research Center of Radiation Medicine in Kiev, Ukraine. But new findings from Byzika and his colleagues should dispel that fear. In a study of more than 200 Chernobyl survivors and their children, the researchers found no evidence of a transgenerational effect. Chernobyl is showing signs of a possible new nuclear accident. Scientists are warning that another explosion could occur in Chernobyl due to the spike of neutron numbers in an underground room called 3052. The numbers may indicate that new fission reactions are taking place, and there is a possibility the smoldering nuclear reaction in a room that's currently unreachable could lead to an explosion, Business Insider reported. It's like the embers in a barbecue pit, Neil Hyatt, a professor of nuclear material science and engineering at the University of Sheffield lecturer, told Science magazine. Maxim Savalev, a senior researcher with the Institute for Safety Problems of Nuclear Power Plants or ISB-NPP in Kiev, Ukraine, agrees with Hyatt, saying, "There are many uncertainties, but we can't rule out the possibility of an accident." Now, researchers have seen a spike in neutron emissions from the room, with levels increasing around 40% since the start of 2016. This points to a growing nuclear fission reaction, so researchers are trying to determine if this surge will fizzle out, as previous spikes in other parts of the ruins have done, or whether they will need to find a way to access the room and intervene. One suggestion for why this is happening is that a new structure placed over the ruined reactor in 2016 is causing the plant to dry out. When uranium or plutonium fuel decay radioactively, they emit neutrons which can promote a fission reaction if the neutrons are captured by another radioactive nuclei. However, large amounts of water slow these neutrons down, preventing them from being captured. We're talking about very low rates of fission, so it's not like a fizzing nuclear reactor, says Hyatt. And our estimation of fissile material in that room means that we can be fairly confident that you're not going to get such rapid release of nuclear energy that you have an explosion, but we don't know for sure. We have seen excursions like this before with other fuel debris. The neutron base rate has increased, stabilized, and decreased again. That's obviously what we hope might happen, he says. Hyatt says that the situation is cause for concern but not alarm, but that if the rate of neutron production continues to increase, researchers may need to intervene. This could involve drilling into the room and spraying it with a fluid containing a substance such as gadolinium nitrate, which would soak up excess neutrons and choke the fission reaction. Ukrainian scientists recently realized that leftover nuclear fission fuel made of uranium has begun reacting again in an inaccessible room deep within a damaged area of the shuttered plant. The telltale sign is increased readings of neutron activity, a measurable byproduct of nuclear fission, according to the scientists from the Institute for Safety Problems of Nuclear Power Plants or ISB-NPP in Kiev, Ukraine, who held discussions about dismantling the reactor last month, according to Science magazine. Chernobyl nuclear power plant is surrounded by a massive megastructure called Chernobyl New Safe Confinement, or NSC. At NSC, there are hundreds of sensors working around the clock to monitor factors like air quality, and the sensors have detected increased neutron activity near the fallen reactor hull where the embers are. Some zones within the NSC are fully sealed off in their own sarcophagus-like structure called the shelter, including the reactor hull where scientists have noticed the increasing neutrons. That means tough questions about what the best course of action is. Inside the reactor hull, everything is a dangerous mess. Scientist Richard Stone reports, quote, "When the reactor's core melted down, uranium fuel rods, their zirconium cladding, graphite control rods, and sand dumped on the core to try to extinguish the fire melted together into a lava. It flowed into the reactor's hull's basement rooms and hardened into formations called fuel-containing materials, or FCMs, which are laden with about 170 tons of irradiated uranium, 95% of the original fuel." It's important to note that the experts don't fear a second Chernobyl disaster, as there isn't enough viable material or surrounding collateral for that kind of threat or damage. But the right kind of small nuclear activity could bring down the shelter itself, which is 34 years old and rickety. Scientists believe rainwater leakage has caused similar higher neutron readings in the past, and they've since installed special chemical sprinklers that can stanch neutrons in most of the interior of the shelter. But some basement rooms are just out of reach even for sprinklers. One of the NSC's great purposes is to finally fully block out of the rain. But water from before has still leached into the farthest reaches, where water helps to slow the neutrons and make them more likely to interact with the remaining nuclear fuel. Scientists figured the threat would decrease as the amount of water dried and receded, but somehow the opposite has happened. Is it safe to visit the area now? One may certainly visit the Chernobyl area, including even the exclusion zone, which is a 30-kilometer radius surrounding the plant, all of whose reactor are now closed. Although some of the radioactive isotopes released into the atmosphere still linger, such as strontium-90 and cesium-137, they're at a tolerable exposure levels for limited periods of time. Some residents of the exclusion zone have returned to their homes at their own free will, and they live in areas with higher than normal environmental radiation levels. However, these levels are not fatal. Exposure to low but unusual levels of radiation over a period of time is less dangerous than exposure to a huge amount at once, and studies have been unable to link any direct increase in cancer risks to chronic low-level exposure. Did you learn a lot about Chernobyl? Are you one of those people who was intrigued about Chernobyl? Let us know your thoughts about it in the comment section below.